Hi. So I'm back to talk more in the context of security management, but also program management and program implementation. Yeah, I don't like to use the word program management too much. I think program implementation, because we're implementing interventions, right, to drive impact on and change a situation from one thing to another. But what I wanted to talk about concretely in the context of all of those things is the myth of acceptance. From the very first mission I did or posting I did, I was told that acceptance was the most important thing to protect us against adverse events that might threaten our assets or our people, i.e. security events or incidents. And I accepted that, right, because I was clueless. I didn't know anything. It was my first time going out to the field and managing projects and stuff like that, managing security. And it was only then, as time went on, that I started to kind of think, okay, well, this thing about acceptance doesn't kind of make sense, no? And for me, it didn't make sense because I didn't see any acceptance strategy anywhere, and I didn't see, well, my bad as well, because I didn't write any or do any. It was kind of assumed that if you spoke to the right people, then that was kind of like acceptance, and if your program was good, that was kind of acceptance. I think that was kind of what I understood at the time, no? But I think it's kind of a myth because, when you go to a location or a place or an operating environment, you are basically, unless you're in a tiny, tiny place, and even then, unless you're really taking time to measure your acceptance, no, acceptance basically is what people having favorable opinions about you, your organization, the different people in your organization, and whatever you're doing in that place, right? Which, when you think about it, like, is really difficult, right? It's really difficult to have that, right, by everybody, right? That's why I call it the myth of acceptance, right? That doesn't mean I don't think acceptance is necessary. I do. I don't think we can just have it without working for it, yeah? So what are some of the barriers to acceptance? I mean, the first one, as I already mentioned, is not having any acceptance strategy, not knowing who we need acceptance from in a kind of a hierarchical way, not as who is the most important, but in terms of their status, but who is the most important in threat terms or in blocking my intervention terms, right? We don't talk about how we're like cultural elephants, yeah, when we go into certain contexts, yeah. Obviously not national staff, or sometimes they are because we kind of make them be, right? But oftentimes we are, especially international staff, which is often the managerial layer of a project or a program, thankfully less and less, but often we are, and I speak from myself, I was so busy, and that I was culturally clueless as to what were the cultural nuances of the place I was working in. Right? I didn't take enough time to understand the different cultural dynamics of the different communities and the things that were going on there, the cultural norms. It's kind of like national staff kind of had to adapt to ours rather than vice versa, and then we acted like, I don't know. It was just, I think it's a cultural ignorance in a way, that sometimes we exhibit, and definitely not respect. Then you could ask the question, okay, how could I possibly show respect when there are different cultural ponderations, different cultures present in the same place? How do you show respect to all of them? Okay, well, I think maybe that's not possible, but what we should take care of is to not show disrespect to any of them, yeah, and we can't do that unless we understand them. So I think we do need to take more time to understand and talk to people about that, no? And I don't think sending an anthropologist is the answer. I think it's easier than that. I think it's just about showing genuine curiosity and asking a lot of questions, like I always say, and asking people, no? Simple questions that aren't like loaded with security, yeah, just genuinely trying to figure out what people's customs are and why and what they believe in, etc., etc., yeah. And then there's the other problem of when we talk about acceptance, that we kind of think, okay, there's just one community, whereas there's thousands of communities. Yeah, there's communities within communities within communities, right down to the individual. Yeah, and which community they believe they're from, and the different opinions that even just a small group can hold, right? So this thought, this thinking that acceptance is kind of a homogenous thing that everybody thinks, no? Is just not realistic, because everybody will have different opinions, different perceptions, and it's just not possible. Then, of course, there will be the clashes that as we go into a place, there will be backlash against whatever we're bringing in. There will be people who want us there, people who don't want us there, people who gain from our presence, people who lose from our presence, and people who couldn't care less. And I think we need to understand that, yeah, because acceptance, again, is kind of, in my opinion, mission impossible when we talk of it from a homogeneous thing, yeah. Certainly when we talk about it as a thing that is protective, yeah, from a security perspective, from a threat perspective. So I think it's better that when we go to places for the first time, yeah, we imagine that we start with acceptance 0. Yeah, and that acceptance is something to be built up, that we don't just get it by virtue of going in and doing something good. It doesn't just come because we're good, we're an NGO, we're doing good. No, that's not how we're seen, I don't think. So if we imagine that we go in with like either a negative on acceptance or a 0, that would be much better. And I would prefer to think that it's much better to go into a context from a threat perspective, threat mitigation, but just assuming that there are many, many resistances to be discovered. And if we go in with a resistance mindset rather than acceptance mindset, our threat identification and mitigation measures, I think, would be more effective than just kind of thinking about acceptance. If we have to talk about acceptance, yeah, I mean, if you try to identify where you have resistances, I mean, because obviously a resistance is more significant than acceptance from a security point of view, right? Because if you've got acceptance, you don't need to worry about that. You're not going to get a problem from that. Where you are going to get a problem from is resistances. So I think they should be identified first. And you might think, okay, but that's threat identification. No, not necessarily, because often when we think of threats, we think of threats to our safety or to our security from armed groups or criminality or fires or stuff like that. Yeah, we don't look at the individual or groups of individuals as pockets of resistance that can affect us not only in our security, but from a program intervention implementation point of view. And the over focus on threats to assets, including humans, rather than as problems in program implementation is, to me, reductive. So I think if we have a more expansive view of understanding where the resistances come from, either to our security mitigation measures or to our anticipating problems that we're going to have intervening or in impact, then it would be much more effective than thinking about, okay, blanket acceptance, which we don't have. So then what we can have is targeted measures to those areas of resistance. And targeted anything is better than blanket anything, right? So targeted acceptance strategies that are designed to reduce resistance will be better and more effective probably than just assuming acceptance. So I'll leave it there, and I'll be back with more on that because it's one of my favorite topics. See you later.